Welcome to TWT Talks with Tito. This is Tito Medrano, back for another episode, back in your life. So today we're going to talk about Dustin Poirier, as promised. We're going to talk about his 7 best UFC fights. These 7 fights, now that he's retired, these 7 fights are mainly in the lightweight division when he's more of an established fighter at this point in his career. More when he's an established fighter at this point in his career. So we're just gonna talk about the top 7 best Dustin Poirier fights. Like I said, I was gonna talk about them regardless. It was sooner than later, but yeah. So let's get into number 7. Coming in at number 7, UFC 299, which was his last win in his career against Benoit Saint Denis. So this fight, coming into this fight, Poirier came off a loss against Justin Gaethje in the rematch for the BMF belt at UFC 291. So there was a lot of, things going on, which a lot of people thought he was an underdog. Believe it or not, Dustin Poirier was an underdog, ranked number 3 at the time, facing Benoit Saint Denis, who was ranked number 12. So it was a risky fight for Dustin Poirier, fighting an up and coming lightweight fighter in the division. So this fight, the first round just looks like Benoit Saint Denis got the better of him. But going into the second round, we saw that Dustin Poirier was starting to get on his flow, starting to do things better. And we know that he was going for the ghillie, didn't get it. But during the stand-up, when he tagged Benoit Saint Denis, and then he dropped him, and then he finished him with the right hand on the ground. Well, because, he dropped Benoit Saint Denis. Benoit Saint Denis went down, and then Dustin Poirier just goes with the right hand. Boom. Knocks him out. And Dustin Poirier just made us realize that y'all must have forgot who I am, because, he pretty much let everyone know that, I'm still that guy. And after that fight, he gets a title fight against Islam Makhachev. So, this is a fight where... this is a fight where you must have forgot. You must have forgot who I am. And Dustin Poirier, again, took a risk fighting a ranked number 12 guy, being number 3 at the time, and got the dub. All right, moving on to number 6. Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler, UFC 281, Madison Square Garden. So this is a fight where there was a lot of back and forth between both guys, Prior to this fight, there was a lot of back and forth. I feel like Poirier believed like he didn't need to fight Chandler. Chandler Vega differed, but this is a fight where I feel like this is a fight where Poirier needed for his legacy, because obviously Michael Chandler, he is a dangerous fight for anyone, and one of the most exciting fighters in MMA/UFC. So, going into this fight, we did see that Chandler was going to try to put Poirier away in the first round. But, the thing is, you're fighting a guy that's been there, done that in the UFC. It wasn't going to be as Chandler thought it would be. But I knew Chandler coming into this fight knew that he was going to go to war with Poirier. He was dominating Poirier in the ground as far as the wrestling goes. But the thing is, Poirier has been in this situation before where, he fights wrestlers, and as soon as he gets the hang out of them, he finds a way to either finish them and keep this fight standing. Towards the end of the first round, we saw Michael Chandler trying to finish this fight, but Poirier just tagged him. And then, Poirier started getting the flow of things. But yeah, Michael Chandler was trying to keep this fight on the ground, but it wasn't going to last for too long. And Poirier just found a way for the finish. And then as soon as Chandler tried to take him down in the third round, Poirier kind of reversed it, got him in the rear naked choke, and submitted Michael Chandler, and gets another big win against another big name, Dustin Poirier. There was a lot of back and forth, after the fight, Chandler telling Chandler why you put your fingers in my thumb, in my mouth, and Chandler said I didn't do that. It was a lot of back and forth, but overall, the fight was good. The fight was really good. I think Chandler had moments in this fight, but the thing is, Dustin Poirier being the experienced fighter in the UFC, which not saying that Chandler wasn't, but Chandler hasn't had as much, not even close of the amount of fights that Poirier had in the UFC. So Dustin Poirier just, has been there, done that, and found the finish and got the dub. And that comes in at number 6 in the list. TWT Talks with Tito. Dustin Poirier's best wins, best fights. But coming in at number 5, Dustin Poirier versus Eddie Alvarez 2. The first fight ended by illegal knees. And there was a lot of animosity between both of these guys too. Eddie Alvarez, former, as well as Michael Chandler, a former Bellator champion. And, a guy that's been there, done that too in the MMA. This fight right here, to me, was the fight that pretty much this is the fight that pretty much people started seeing Dustin Poirier different. He wasn't just a contender at this point. He was someone that you were talking about, a future champion. So this is that fight where, and Eddie Alvarez is the type of fighter that's going to bring a dog out of you. And he brought the dog out of Dustin Poirier. The thing is, in the first round, when Eddie Alvarez did when he did the elbow on his shoulder, he was on the ground and he did the elbow on his shoulder. The referee said, okay, stop. I think Eddie got the fight's been so long. I would have to rewatch it. It was 2018. So the fight, they kept the fight standing. Eddie got in trouble for the 12-6 elbows. But the thing is, he didn't land it on Poirier's face. And I'm not here to this is Dustin Poirier's list. This is about him, but I'm not here to defend anyone. But I feel like the 12-6 elbows he hit him on the trap or on the shoulder of Dustin Poirier. So it's kind of like, why did you move that position? I don't know. But going into the second round, Poirier started getting the hang of things, in the stand-up, started picking Eddie Alvarez apart and beat him by TKO in the second round. And then Poirier submits another big name on his big resume. And that was on UFC Fox, by the way, back when the UFC was on Fox. So yeah, that comes in at number 5 in this list. Coming in at number 4, Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje, first fight, part 1. So this fight was good. There was times where both of these guys were, Poirier came from beating Anthony Pettis. Justin Gaethje came coming off a loss against Eddie Alvarez, his first MMA loss. So, both of these guys were going in there trying to get this dub, trying to put a name, trying to move a step closer to the belt. And, yeah, back and forth from round 1 to 3, even though Gaethje got some points taken away for, I think he kicked him in between his legs. So, he got a point deducted. But aside of that, the fight was really good. Like, both guys went to war. And then round 4, Dustin Poirier pretty much, finds the opening and gets the finish and puts Justin Gaethje on thin ice, wobbles him, and then Herb Dean steps in. Oh, Herb Dean was the ref at the time. Herb Dean steps in and stops the fight. And Dustin Poirier gets another. Well, this was before the Eddie Alvarez fight, so a lot of these fights are kind of like mixed up, but they're not in order. But the thing is, because it's about his best fights. But yeah, Dustin Poirier beats Justin Gaethje, and yeah, so we know that these guys later face each other at UFC 291, which it was a rematch, and it was this time for the BMF belt to induct the BMF belt back. Gaethje wins that fight in the rematch. But Dustin Poirier did beat him in the first fight in the 4th round. So yeah, going into so that's comes in at number 4. Coming in at number 3, Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor 2, UFC 257. What can I say about this fight? There was the last time these guys fought each other prior to UFC 257. It was UFC 178 in the featherweight division. Conor was a big household name, was coming up. Dustin Poirier was an already established fighter. Conor beats him by... Conor finishes, knocks him out in the first round. And then we're thinking, are these guys ever going to face each other again? That was probably the last... That was the last time Dustin Poirier fought at the featherweight division. After that, he moved up weight. And then Conor did what he did in the featherweight division. After that, I think after beating Dustin Poirier, he beat Chad Mendes, I believe. Yeah, I believe he fought Chad Mendes, then he fought for the belt, or he fought... It's been so long. Dennis Seaver, and Chad Mendes, and then he fought Aldo, won the featherweight division, and we know what he did after that. But during that time, Dustin Poirier, after he lost to Conor McGregor the first time, he left the featherweight division. So they do the rematch 7 years later. This was in Abu Dhabi, UFC 257. Yeah, 257. 257. Conor is coming back from, he was out for a while, and he came back and fought Dustin Poirier. I feel like Conor was a favorite in this fight because obviously he got the win over Poirier, but a lot of people forgot how good Dustin Poirier started to picking up wins prior to fighting McGregor. Yeah, and he finishes McGregor in the second round. The thing is about this fight, McGregor was very kind of like respectful to Dustin and all that. So we expected, and he was like that too after the fight. Beats Conor. So Poirier and McGregor are 1-1 at this point. They do the trilogy at UFC 264 in Vegas. This fight ended by doctor stoppage because McGregor twisted his ankle after the second round. But Poirier was pretty much dominating that fight, if we're being honest. But the second fight was probably the best fight of the trilogy when Poirier, finishes McGregor, avenges that loss from UFC 278. I mean, 178 and 2014. So, and it was good for Poirier to get that win back. And yeah, that comes in at number 3. Coming in at number 2, probably one of my favorite Dustin Poirier fights in 2020. This was at UFC ESPN event. Well, in the Ace Packs during the pandemic, Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker. Man, that was fight of the year for 2020, if you ask me. That fight was just absolutely amazing. Dustin Poirier, Dan Hooker. And the reason why I say amazing is because Dan Hooker went on the record saying that that he was going to beat Dustin Poirier and all this. Dustin Poirier came back from losing to Khabib. He lost the interim belt to Khabib. He lost the interim belt to Khabib, and then he had to get surgery because he had to get some surgery done. So he was out for a while. But Dustin Poirier came back, looked great in that fight. Back and forth. These guys put it on each other. We literally, because during this time in the pandemic, the Ace Packs, you can hear the sounds of the punches, the kicks, and pop, pop, pop. You just hear it because there's no fans during that time, and it was just like, man, it was great. That fight was just great. You saw that Poirier won by decision. Dan Hooker? Yeah, Dan Hooker was like, he was beat up in that fight, and Dustin Poirier, he was so beat up they took him in the ambulance, and Dustin Poirier just remind us all, you must have forgot who I am, because during this time, Dan Hooker thought because he lost to Khabib, he was gonna get another win, but yeah, Dustin Poirier was like, you know what, I'm not gonna lose 2 in a row. I haven't lost 2 in a row in my career. I'm not gonna lose 2 in a row to Dan Hooker. And man, did he put a statement. He even told Dan Hooker, like, you're getting there, man, you're getting there. And I remember during that time, Dan Hooker goes to his corner, and then Dustin Poirier saying something in Spanish, dale agua, dale agua, dale agua. Dustin Poirier knowing some Spanish because he lived in Florida, trained in Florida for the majority of his career. So yeah, that was my favorite Dustin Poirier fight, but it's not number one. That was number two. That is not number one. And by the way, yeah, I just remember what I was gonna say. A lot of people, when he fought McGregor at UFC 257, where he knocked out McGregor in the second fight, a lot of people thought that Conor was gonna he was the favorite, and they thought Conor was gonna destroy Poirier. I was like, do you guys realize who Poirier beat? Like, he beat a lot of former champions: Anthony Pettis, Justin Gaethje, Max Holloway, Eddie Alvarez. He beat all these big names. Just how are you gonna doubt him at this point of his career? All right, coming in at number one, Max Holloway versus Dustin Poirier 2, UFC 236 for the UFC lightweight interim belt. This fight was amazing. It was amazing. This is probably the best moment of Dustin Poirier's career. Beating Max Holloway at the time, UFC featherweight champion. That fight was just war. Those two guys were just meant to fight each other. Prior to this fight, Poirier did beat Max Holloway at UFC 143, and it was Max Holloway's debut. But yeah, man, this fight was just absolutely amazing. It was awesome. Poirier wins the UFC interim title. It wasn't the undisputed title. Wish it would have been the undisputed title during this time, because during this time Khabib was suspended and he could have defended. They could have just, and I don't want to get any heat from Khabib fans, but they could have just took the belt from Khabib and made this the official belt. And I'm probably gonna get a lot of heat because of that. Because it would have made more sense. Instead of fighting for an interim belt, it should have been for the undisputed belt. They should have had Poirier and Holloway fight for the undisputed belt. And then, obviously, Poirier was going to fight Khabib eventually. They were going to give Khabib the rematch. They were going to give Khabib the first dips for the belt. So I don't know why they didn't make that belt the undisputed belt. But that's just me. But it was great to see Dustin Poirier just get that moment, win that UFC interim belt. It wasn't the undisputed belt, unfortunately, but it felt like it was the undisputed belt. It really felt like it was. And it was great to see him get that moment in his career. Obviously, after that, he lost the belt. He lost to Khabib, then beat Hooker, then beat McGregor twice, then, let's just go over his resume real quick since we're talking about Mr. Poirier. Lost to Oliveira, beat Chandler, beat Gaethje, lost to Gaethje. Beat Chandler, lost to Gaethje, lost to beat Benoit Saint-Denis, which was his last fight that he won. Obviously, he lost to Islam and Max Holloway in the last fight. Yeah, he lost those. That's the only time he lost back-to-back fights. And yeah, but his fight against Max Holloway, number 2, was arguably the best fight that he ever had. That was his best fight because he won the belt. He won the interim belt. Again, it wasn't the undisputed belt, unfortunately. Wish it would have been, though. But the reality is this: he won. He won a piece of the belt, regardless of what you think. Poirier won a piece of the belt, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah. Well, what is your favorite Dustin Poirier fight? Comment below in the IG, TWT Talks with Tito. Subscribe to YouTube. Subscribe to Spotify. This week is SummerSlam, 2 nights. So your boy's going to be busy watching that event. 2 nights. The first time in the history they do 2 nights for SummerSlam. The hottest event of the summer. So I have a lot to talk about next week. But this week was about Dustin Poirier's best fights, best wins in the UFC history. So you know how to give him. I had to talk about Poirier and give him, his fair due. Because here at TWT Talks with Tito, we appreciate what he has done in his career. And yeah, and we know that guy's going to have a great retirement. And he's going to be involved in the sport regardless of him not fighting anymore. But yeah, with that being said, guys, thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode. Don't forget, next week we're going to be talking about post-SummerSlam, 2 nights, first time in history. I'll see you guys then. You guys take care. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.